Welcome to the Coach Podcast with Coach Keren Eldad. Settle in. We're about to make you feel really good.
Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I do not do that thing. Dwight Schrute, The Office. Welcome back to the Coach Podcast, where we dive into the fears and challenges that hold overachievers back and explore ways to overcome them for a more fulfilling life. I'm your host, Coach Keren Eldad, and today we're tackling a real doozy, the one that you may already suspect is going to speak directly to you, and that is the feeling, I might be an asshole, but everyone else is an idiot. Today we're going to talk about the arrogance of overachievers, which is also another feeling manifest in overachievers that is real, spectacular, and that costs so many overachievers not only their leadership, but their happiness. Before I dive in, I want you to know this podcast is a prelude and companion to my first book, Gilded, Breaking Free from the Cage of Ambition, Perfectionism, and the Relentless Pursuit of More. You can get your first copy right now, or 10 copies, on our website, www.breakfreewithgilded.com. In case you're just tuning in, I'd like to warmly recommend that you go back and listen to the first 2 episodes in this season. The first one was, If I'm Doing So Well, Why Am I Still Unhappy? And the second one was, I'm Empty and Aching, and I Don't Know Why. We're getting more and more intense and lower on the emotional scale, and they're going to help you to get into the swing of things and introduce you to the season's main premise. For now, what you need to know if you're tuning in right off the bat is that this series is dedicated to the thoughts with which overachievers grapple privately that they find hard to articulate, but should. Having coached thousands of people who fit a high performer profile by any measure over my almost decade of work as an executive coach, I have found that beneath the surface, even overachievers, or maybe especially overachievers, often grapple with feelings of emptiness and the weight of unmet expectations that cause them dissatisfaction. If even a whisper of recognition stirs within you at hearing these episodes, or the titles alone, then this series holds the clarity that you seek. I'm going to explore throughout the series the 7 principal ways in which you sabotage your own success and mitigate your joy, and begin to introduce the ideas that are explored more deeply in the book by helping you not only to get clear and get to awareness around this, but to show you how you can rebuild your reality and overcome this. Take a deep breath and settle in. This episode's going to help you. And though it will, like my coaching, challenge you at first, it's ultimately going to make you feel really good. Now let's proceed with that third thought. I might be an asshole, but everyone else is an idiot. In this episode, we're tackling mental or intellectual arrogance and feelings of superiority as part of your harbored secret thoughts. This year, I read Kara Swisher's memoir, Burn Book. It's about her time thus far as a journalist covering big ideas and innovations in tech, and inevitably also covering the titans of Silicon Valley behind them, the overlords. Swisher is fun to read. She has a knack for puncturing puffed-up male egos and egos in general, and the tech luminaries whose stories she includes in this tell-all come off as thin-skinned man-children: Zuckerberg, Bezos, Musk. You get the gist. For instance, she shares the story of a moment in which she was about to interview Bill Gates, and he didn't even want to go on stage with Steve Jobs because Jobs took a tiny jab at him earlier. Much larger swings are taken at Elon Musk, at Mark Zuckerberg, at Jeff Bezos, who all seem in this book to be real tools, and even though at times the anecdotes are amusing, what they belie is a very serious and a very concerning truth. First, that these men, though they absolutely behave like babies, are extremely influential. Second, that they mostly become man babies thanks to a grotesquely Machiavellian worldview, which has enabled and exacerbated their bank accounts as they have risen by increasingly sycophantic people around them. And third, that they're not just unself-aware, but that they're cruel. That last note, that's where I'd like to open today's episode. The most common blind spot for so many overachievers is that their worldview is so rigid, see episode 1 of this season, and that their standards for themselves are so high, they're pedaling so hard to measure up, that they can become really judgmental, reflexively judgmental, not only towards themselves, and make no mistake, though you're all mostly cruel to yourselves, you're also cruel towards other people. In some, this mental arrogance, this perfectionism, is merely noticed as bluntness, as harshness. In some cases, sort of comes across as being a blowhard or being a know-it-all. But in many cases, it also comes across as a lack of empathy. I guess that's par for the course. After all, how could you have empathy when you have none for yourself? Many of you have such hardwired libertarian notions around hard work that you don't get why empathy is even valuable. You may even discuss it, and if you do, if Brené Brown sounds to you like she's full of baloney, you may be in the extreme case category. The extreme case, a person like Musk, gets so obsessed with their own expertise that they do not listen to anyone else, and they dismiss even masterpieces as simplistic. Worst of all, they become not only disconnected from others, but they begin to display a superiority complex which exhibits behavior that is controlling and cruel. You see it every day on Twitter. There is something wrong with him, Swisher said of Musk during an AP interview I watched after reading the book. And she continued, he is in desperate need of attention. He is a classic narcissist who has turned into a malevolent narcissist. If you're looking for one more recommendation, by the way, in this episode, I'm going to drop a lot of things to check out and to read. And throughout the episodes of this season, we're going to link them in the show notes. Then before I dive into the link between us overachievers and a vile person like Elon Musk, I want to recommend that you Google a graduation speech by two-term Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker at Northwestern University in 2023. By now, a video of that speech has gone viral on social media for all the right reasons, and you may have even watched it. If you have, watch it again. And if you haven't, take a moment to watch it right after you finish listening to today's episode. The speech, which references several quotes from the iconic sitcom The Office, opens with the sentence, if you want to be successful in this world, you must develop your own idiot detection system. The best way to spot an idiot? Look for the person who is cruel. Pritzker then explains that being cruel is a reflex to base instincts and a way of succumbing to non-thought instead of to real, thorough, and deep thought. J.D. Vance comes to mind, such as the mark he explains of an idiot. And by way of making this point, he says, when we see someone who doesn't look like us or sound like us or act like us or love like us or live like us, the first thought that crosses almost everyone's brain is rooted in either fear or judgment or both. That's evolution. We survived as a species by being suspicious of things that we aren't familiar with. In order to be kind, he says, we must shut down that animal instinct, that primitive scarcity mindset we talked about in session 1. And then he says, and we must force our brain to travel a different pathway. Empathy and compassion are evolved states of being. They require the mental capacity to step past our most primal urges. That's it. That's what's happened to so many people at the top. And that's what it's especially a danger for those overachievers who rise to the top. The rise to the top tends to narrow our world, not just our worldview. And then, as we struggle and hustle to survive at this rarefied place atop the mountain, we run the horrible risk of beginning to see ourselves as other, possibly better than all the rest of the people. If and when this happens, we can find ourselves becoming more and more insular, more rigid, more conservative in our thoughts, and increasingly judgmental. But guess what? You don't fool anyone with that superiority complex. As any pop psychology piece will attest, that complex is one of inferiority, and it's shooting you in the foot, happiness-wise, joy-wise, satisfaction-wise. So what is it even worth? As Pritzker ends his sermon, he says, over many years in politics and business, I have found the one thing to be universally true is that the kindest person in the room is often the smartest. Well, listener, I've found the same to be true too. Kind people are not sloppy or stupid or weak. They're strong and brilliant and tend to have a massive influence. Even better, it's not the kind of influence that holds Ukraine by the balls. It's the kind of influence that spreads light in the world, which brings me to why I'm telling you all of this and what the connection is to superstars like you and, well, another regular civilian, me. It's this. Even when we're not cruel, we can appear to be or come across as cruel because of the rigidity of our standards and because we are usually also being cruel to ourselves. In a state of perfectionism, we judge ourselves and others oh so harshly. Additionally, again, while our cruelty may not appear overt or even as cruelty, we may still cut ourselves off emotionally from most people, seeing those who express having made a mistake or having failed as weak nincompoops instead of what they are, just like us, no more and no less human. Emotional disconnection through superiority is disconnection. So let's do a quick pulse check in today's episode. And then I'm going to tell you a story about the time I came face to face with my own mental arrogance and how I dissolved it so you can too. The pulse check will be through a few questions for you. Answer them for yourself. Do you find it very important to always look together? Are you terrified of losing face? Are you obsessed with showing people how superior your knowledge is? Have you ever name dropped? Does it cause you embarrassment to ever admit that you don't know something definitively, or that you may be or have been wrong? If you are an overachiever, chances are you would say yes to these, or most if you're being honest. Here's a classic example. A potential client wants to start a new business, but her friends in private equity thinks it's ridiculous and risky. And she has this one friend who tried and failed, which is why it's so sad for that person and we all feel really, really terrible about them. So all the friends are whispering about it. Plus, the economy is so terrible right now. And do you know how many businesses fail anyway? Most people relay to me a state of thinking that way. And by the way, they also tell me that that's how they feel about coaching. They chase it immediately with a statement like, but isn't it all a snake oil industry for pansies? And aren't all coaches all flunkies who couldn't make it in the real world and don't have a serious degree? And how do I know it's even going to work? Also, who needs help anyway, they will say. I mean, do people who went to Harvard even do this sort of thing? I share these streams of thoughts that seem disjointed with you because this is what these thoughts sound like in an avalanche. Feel free to apply this to whatever scenario you find yourself judging incorrectly. If your thoughts sound anything like, I know this already, I got this, everyone else doesn't know what they're talking about, other people lost and failed through this, therefore it's bad, it's this way or the wrong way, and don't you know who I am? Then you would do very well to check yourself and try to loosen your grip. At very least, catch yourself, because mental arrogance is obvious, and so obvious it's almost comical, but also always spews outward. For example, I told you I would tell you a story. I once confronted a beloved client about his harsh leadership style and extremely judgmental demeanor with his team, and he said, "Yeah, I get it, coach, but trust me, I've tried to listen, and I've tried to care, but these boobs and nincompoops just don't get it." I loved that so much, I put it in some of my audios, because it was hilarious and kind of sad. Don't worry, he totally overcame that. Another time, a client told me that he was not going to read Brené Brown's magnum opus, Dare to Lead, because, and I quote, "Why would he take advice from a woman who looks like his Aunt Linda?" Yeah, I thought, why would you? After all, us millions of people whose lives have been transformed by her work and her deep and thorough research were all lowly morons who can be tricked by a commoner who clearly isn't as brilliant and worthy as you are. By now, can you relate? I sure can. I can. Earlier, I promised you a full story that was just about me, and here it is. My first toe dip into the world of self-help and spirituality, aside from the books, was joining a Kabbalah class in New York City. Truth be told, I heard that Madonna occasionally showed up there, so I went to see her. I never saw Madonna. Well, I saw her one time from afar. But I ended up staying because the lessons were compelling and because I liked them, which was a breakthrough. Because until the point at which I sat myself down and brought myself to sitting down, I had met pretty much every piece of motivational content with disdain and aversion that bordered not only on dismissal, but on disgust. At least here, I was ready to sit and listen. And sometimes, in the beginning, when someone raised their hand to share their story and their problems and their questions, I couldn't help but cringe and in my head vociferously judge them. What a loser, I would think. How'd they get themselves into the situation, I would think. Why can't they just get themselves together and work harder? The irony was completely lost on me during these mental rants. It was that I was lost, if not more lost at that point than any of them. And it was that because of my commitment to that superiority, I had egoically crafted for myself a distance. And I didn't even feel the sting so much of my feelings of failure and of not measuring up. And that kept me in that hell of disconnectedness from my true self, who is a lover and a sweetheart and a joiner and who has a real purpose for their lives. I stayed there for far too long. If you're resonating with any of this, I want you to know that I have zero inclination to use the way overused term narcissist here or anything like that. For starters, I'm not a diagnostician. And for another, intellectual arrogance is very common and a varied phenomenon in overachievers, and of course, this arrogance is encountered in all walks of life. Narcissism belongs in the antisocial behavioral family, and the numbers of people who are truly diagnosable in that realm are thankfully very few. I am not talking here about being like Donald Trump or anything near that. I'm simply talking about a tendency to being loath to admit a mistake, a tendency to sometimes put other people publicly in their place or think you are more often right than anyone else. It is also manifested by excessive risk-taking, people who don't tolerate dissent, people who seek agreement all the time, people who extremely experience jealousy, and people who intimidate others into agreeing with them. All of these come from insecurity, and that has been born of and been force-fed by the incessant drive to achieve, to be someone. The drive to achieve, in many, is an overcompensation for feelings of inadequacy that may create a cycle of seeking external validation to confirm self-worth. And this is how they come to display intellectual or mental arrogance. Now, the pain of staying here, this blinkered, this hindered by your own ego, is the premise of the entire series and of my book, because make no mistake, it's hell to be trapped in this arrogance. It costs you so much more than just nobody wants to be friends with you. It hinders your ability to absorb any new or valuable information. It devastates your decision-making ability. It makes you super susceptible to the manipulation of sycophants. Yes, they're playing you. It scorches your chances to connect with others and keeps you separated from yourself. We discussed the outcomes of these further in episode 2. In order for you to really sit down and confront your feelings so you go no further, but realize today, in today's episode, that these are costing you so much that you end up bankrupt and alone. As the bard Justin Bieber sang, "What if you had it all, with nobody to call? Maybe then you'd know me. Because I've had everything, but no one's listening, and that's so effing lonely." So my plea to you today is drop the arrogance. Want to know why? It's not just because all of this is costing you. It's above all else because it's a lie. You're not at all above others. There's literally nothing about you that is so special or exceptional. Sorry. You're a human, like everyone else. And you're not getting that that is what's keeping you so separate. Not your exceptionalism. Your sameness. You will need to drop some hardcore beliefs to get past this. Namely, that success only comes as it relates to power, money, or status. That there exists actual benchmarks of success. That mistakes are a disaster or make you seem like a failure, that the opinions of others matter very, very much, and that seeking status among the people is of extreme importance. You have to examine these beliefs. None of them are true. Also, none of them are useful. The only things that these beliefs will get you is more success, but less vulnerability, which is not real success. Less of a chance to be and to live and to be loved as you truly are. Less of an ability to empathize and therefore truly connect with, let alone influence others, and a lifetime of more pretense, more mask, more cruelty, more idiocy. I recognize that listening to this episode, if you're still listening, might hurt or might anger you. If it has you rattled and accusing me in your head of being an ignoramus myself, don't worry, I had the same response years ago, but you should also listen more closely and listen several times. I do not personally mind it, but I hope that you don't shoot the messenger here and get over yourself for long enough to listen and to hear the section where I offer you a way out. These findings that I offered you today are based on years of work and research with C-suite executives and entrepreneurs at the top of their fields. They are important to show you and even shove in your face because your happiness depends on your ability to see and face the truth and handle that your life inevitably will have to change. Again, this is going to be hard, for even as overachievers come to terms with the unhappiness that permeates their lives and they attempt to paint a picture of having it all together, many are incapable of leaving the trappings of success behind, let alone dropping the beliefs, even if it might mean a more peaceful future. So instead, many will lash out, they'll shoot the messengers, the teachers like me, the books, the research, and everyone else who's trying to help them. If that's you, so be it. Maybe it's not your time. Come back when you feel ready to listen. If this episode has gotten through, though, I have 3 practical lessons or tools in this one for anyone who's ready to swap the challenging and never-ending quest for survival for the fittest for a life of fulfillment and harmony. And these are, number 1, shift your focus from trying to achieve more success to trying to achieve more happiness. If you think about what is stressing you in the first place, it's the force with which you're trying to live, the effort that you're applying to try so hard to achieve success. Use the skills that you already have in goal setting and set goals for doing the things consistently that will truly make you happy. Forget the vacation destinations that will simply make you look cooler on Instagram and seek out places and activities that truly make your heart sing. Aim straight at harmony and at upliftment and at happiness, leveraging your extraordinary ability to focus your energies on doing what brings you automatic joy and working backwards from there. You are going to feel calmer, more fulfilled, and happier. Practically speaking, this means that when faced with the next step you're about to take, ask, does this or will this bring me joy? Next, instead of asking, what am I getting out of this? Start asking, how may I serve? When I started to come out of my own self-imposed anxious existence, at first I was a bit too shaky to really develop a compassion for myself or to slow down. So I did something easier. I turned my focus to helping other people by joining Crisis Text Line as a volunteer suicide counselor. It worked. Something powerful happens when you serve other people. You stop thinking about yourself so much. You also stop thinking anybody is that different from you. You will see. Moreover, it feels so good to do good, and it allows you to chill out about that other stuff you were working on so hard to control because you gained some much-needed perspective. Now, maybe you're not called to help people in a crisis, and that's fine. But I am calling on you now to bring peace into the vanguard of your life and into your soul. Have an internal revolution. The way to get to this is stop asking in any situation, how do I fit in? And ask instead, how can I be helpful? This is going to open your heart so much. And number 3, lastly, stop beating yourself up. You know, a few months ago, I was invited to a dinner party in the home of a very well-known, very wealthy fashion designer. As I enjoyed a tour of her apartment, which P.S. was fabulous, I marveled at the beauty around me, the product of her meticulous eye for style. But when we sat down to eat, I found that my hostess was beside herself. Apparently, the table had been set with the wrong plates she did not believe suited the occasion. All around, the hostess commented that the dishes on the table were lovely, but she was having none of it. Here are some of the things she said about the terrible mistake. I can't believe this happened. That was so stupid. I can't believe I didn't check things in advance. I really hope you will all forgive me. Now, for the average person, this story may seem comical, kind of like the HBS story that I told in the very beginning of this season. But to me, it's a rather alarming and alarmingly common thing to say. A lot of people speak this way to themselves, even on matters that feel trivial. A lot of bosses have meltdowns about tiny little silly things. From missing a deadline to eating an extra calorie, perfectionists of all kinds constantly give themselves a hard time over the most mundane things, and this is one of the things that makes them cruel. No matter how chic the term is in certain circles, perfectionism never serves you. To paraphrase author Elizabeth Gilbert, perfectionism is just a way of showing how insecure you are. If you, like so many of my clients, have experienced panic attacks or anxiety attacks, suffer from OCD tendencies, or are hypercritical or gossip about others, or are currently challenged with an eating or control disorder, like self-harm, perfectionism is at the root of those issues. You would do well to learn how to employ all 3 tactics above, and especially this one. Speak kindly to yourself in your quest for relief. In the case of Plategate, I would instead say, I didn't know. It's okay. I did my best. I hope you still like the plates, and I can still start over tomorrow. Doesn't that just feel so much better? I've got a message for everyone out there listening. It is possible to get out of the overachiever paradox, the state of looking like you have it all but internally feeling unhappy. The hardest part is admitting that there is a problem, that I am always worried about the other shoe dropping, and that becomes doubly hard if you've been struggling with the mental arrogance or perfectionism or know-it-all syndrome of which we have spoken here today. The key to your resurrection lies in staying focused on not being perfect, but being human. I want you to know that if you're open to change and you accept vulnerability and imperfection as paths to freedom, you can commit to doing the work and you will find happiness and joy, just as I did back at Kabbalah. All I had to do was keep going back, keep listening. Each time, my external veneer got chipped away more and more. And some months in, I found myself showing up with no pretenses, mingling with no mask, asking my own questions, and sharing my own story, and waiting eagerly to hear others share their stories, which I now appreciated deeply. That's when I started to see and find that everyone else was thrilled to see me too. That's all for today's episode. Again, the book is called Gilded, Breaking Free from the Cage of Ambition, Perfectionism, and the Relentless Pursuit of More. I hope you get your copy. And I hope you love this episode and that these exercises have served you well today. Thanks again for listening. If you love today's show, please take the time to subscribe to the Coach Podcast and leave us a 5-star review. I'm going to see you in our next episode. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Coach Podcast.